Hi everyone, in today's lesson we're going to talk about horizontal shifts, also called phase shifts, of trig graphs. So we already know the formula y equals a sine bx plus or minus d. And we also know the same formula with cosine. We know that the absolute value of a, is the amplitude, so we can go ahead and write that. That we already know. And we know that the plus or minus d is the vertical shift. But the question is what is this plus or minus c on the inside of the parentheses? Now you should recognize that this is a horizontal shift. So if it's plus c, it goes to the left. Remember, it's the opposite. And if it's minus c, it means to go to the right. All right, so let's see if we can analyze some equations. So problem number 1. Y equals negative sine 2, parentheses, x plus 3/4 plus 10. So we know the amplitude is the number in front of the sine, and it's the absolute value. So the absolute value of negative 1 is 1. The number of cycles, we didn't define that up here, I apologize. B is the number of cycles, so we can write that here. B is the cycles. All right, so the number in front of the parentheses is the cycles, so that's 2. The period is defined as 2 pi over b, where b is the number of cycles. So 2 pi over 2, which is pi. Interval is period over 4, which is pi over 4. Vertical shift is outside the parentheses, so that's plus 10, so it goes up 10. And now the horizontal shift. So remember, if it's plus a number, like it is here, plus means to go to the left. So our horizontal shift is simply left 3 pi over 4. And that's it. All right, let's try example number 2. So the amplitude is the number in front of the cosine, but the absolute value. So the absolute value of 4 is 4. Now, the cycles is our b value. But do you notice how the b is tucked inside the parenthesis here, when in the formula the b is outside the parenthesis? That is actually going to make a big difference. So we actually have to get this into the form so it's b and then x minus some number. So we actually have to divide this out. So what do I mean by that? So if I have 2x minus pi, I want to divide out the 2 from each piece. So 2 followed by an open parentheses. These cancel. We're left with x. And then minus pi over 2. So now you see this 2 parentheses just looks like this, where the 2 is on the outside. So anytime your cycle number is hanging out inside the parenthesis, it actually has to look like this. It has to be outside. So we just divide it out like so. So now my b is technically this 2. And period is defined as 2 pi over b. So same thing, 2 pi over 2, which is in fact pi. The interval is the period over 4, so pi over 4. My vertical shift is the number on the outside, so we're going to go down 7. And now my horizontal shift. So we have to look here. So if there's a minus, this means to go to the right. So this is right pi over 2. All right, so what I'd like you to do now is try numbers 3 and 4 for homework, and I will go over those tomorrow in class. All right, let's see if we can graph shifts that are horizontal. Okay, so we need all of the pieces like we did before. We need the A, the C, the P, and the I. So my amplitude here is we're going to look at this 3. So we're going to take the absolute value of 3, which gives me 3. My cycles is the number in front of the x, which is 1. Period is 2 pi over the cycles, which is 2 pi. The interval is the period divided by 4, which reduces to pi over 2. Now we're still going to do what we count by because we want to go up to 2 pi. So I'm going to take this interval and make it 1 pi over 2, 2 pi over 2, 3 pi over 2, 4 pi over 2. And I think I can stop there because 4 pi divided by 2 is in fact 2 pi. So I'm going to set up my axes. And I'm going to put 4 on each side. All right, make sure you label them. Okay, now my y-axis needs to be labeled up until 3. So I'm going to count up 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so if this were just a regular cosine graph, we would start up at 3 and go down, up, right? But we have a horizontal shift. So this horizontal shift tells us we are going to start over to the right pi over 2. So this is as simple as it gets. Instead of starting my graph here, if it were y equals 3 cos x, we would start up here. Because I have this right pi over 2, I'm literally going to take this point and we're actually going to start here instead. And that's it. So we start right pi over 2 and we follow the same pattern that we would. We're going to graph a normal cosine curve. So we start here and we go like something like that. And now we just ignore this other point here and we follow it through. So we're going to ignore this one. So we started here, we went down, up, down, and now we're just going to follow the cycle back through. So this point is going to go here, 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 and here. So there is my cosine graph shifted. Now doesn't this cosine graph shifted look like a sine graph? That's pretty cool, right? So here is where we start. Alright, that one might have been a little confusing. Let's try another one. Alright, the first thing I notice is that my b, or my number of cycles, is hanging out inside the parentheses. And I know that that can't be there. So I need to take this 2, x minus pi, and I need to take out that 2. So I'm going to divide each of these pieces by 2 here. So I'm going to be left with x minus pi over 2. So my new equation is y equals a negative sine 2 parentheses negative pi over 2. So now my amplitude, my a, my c, my p, and my I. My amplitude is the absolute value of negative 1, which is 1. My cycles is now 2. Period is 2 pi over b, where b is the number of cycles. So my period is pi. And my interval is my period divided by 4. So I'm going to count. 1/4 pi, 2/4 pi, 3/4, 4/4, and I think I have to keep going. I have to go to 2 pi, 5/4, 6/4, 7/4, and 8/4, and that's my 2 pi. So I'd like you to pause the video and set up your x and y axes, and then hit resume when you're ready. Okay, this is what it should look like. Okay, I didn't label my axes here because my marker is too thick to fit all these, but there are 8 tick marks here and 8 tick marks here. So this graph has minus pi. So what that means is we're actually going to go right pi over 2. Okay, so pi over 2 is actually, if the first tick mark is pi over 4, the second tick mark, 2/4, is pi over 2, so right here. So that is where we're going to start our graph. But we have to pay attention that our graph is a negative sine graph. So instead of starting at the origin, we're actually going to start over pi over 2. Pi over 2 is the second one. So our first tick mark is actually going to be right here. And then remember, a negative sine graph goes down, up, up, down. So the next tick mark over, we go down, up, up, down, down, and then up. So this is what your curve is going to look like. Now we just have to follow the pattern. So if I'm going this way, going to the right, then I'll have to go up and come back down going to the left. So this next mark is going to go up here, down, down, up, up, down, down, up, up, down. So that is what my graph looks like. All right, I know this was a lot to handle. If you have any questions, please jot them down, and then we'll go over all this tomorrow in class. Okay, have a good night.